Welcome. Stefano, thank you for accepting the invitation. For us, it's a big pleasure to be here with us. Today for us is an special event because, well, it's the beginning of a new term. But since 18 years ago, IAAC has organized some international competitions online, trying to talk and to discuss about general topics that are under discussion in the world. The first one we did like 9 editions ago, 18 years ago, was about the self-sufficient buildings. And many years later, this seems to be one fundamental topic for the future of our living environment. That's why today, in parallel to the lecture of Stefano, we are launching the 9th edition of the Advanced Architecture Contest. That was an idea from Lucas Capelli that has become a place where more than 10,000 young designers has been presenting their proposals. We publish a book with Actar in every edition. And then the winners get the possibility to make a master at IAAC and then also to get some economical compensation. So we thought that the best person to discuss about the future of architecture was Stefano, because he's an architect, an urban planner. He's full professor at the Politecnico di Milano, but he's also professor in Shanghai. He's the director of the Future City Lab at the Tongji University. That is a postdoctoral research program which explores the future of contemporary metropolis under the perspective of biodiversity and urban forestry. Boeri has been working in many research and many publications, and at the same time, as some good architects that we admire, has developed an international architectural practice. Stefano somehow became well-known or better well-known everywhere after his project Bosco Verticale in Milano, that somehow was one of the first international icons that was representing how nature and the traditional architecture could merge in a new way and in a different reality. Stefano is also a good friend in Barcelona. He has been here many times. He was also collaborating in the School of Barcelona with Eduard Bru and other good friends. And that's why I would like to welcome to Stefano, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vicente. It's really a pleasure to be with you. And I'm sharing the screen. I hope you see it. Hold on a moment. Okay, do you see the screen?
Yes, we see the screen with the whole window and
no, we should try to. What's happening?
Because if we share like this,
yeah,
it goes in stop, so it doesn't let the slide to go ahead.
You need to share the screen instead to share the application, I think.
Now, can you see now?
No, not yet, not now.
Va in pausa. Puoi farlo in
perché vai in pausa? Se condividere schermo live. Oh, vai tu.
I don't know.
Now you see.
We see the main. Yeah, now yes, it seems.
Okay.
Very good. So thank you so much. I think, Vincente, you were introducing, not simply me, but you are introducing one of the main issue of our profession, which is about the relation between design and research. And that's a kind of, let's say, fertile obsession that is part of our life. And, you know, my generation was used to think that design and research are two different fields. Design, it's about, let's say, defining a very, very clear, unique morphological and physical configuration. So to, let's say, to arrive to select from let's say a wide world of possibilities, only one final physical specific configuration. And research is, in a way, something that goes in the totally opposite direction. So we have to open the future, we have to introduce opportunities, possibilities, suggestion, information, ideas, data, and so on. And basically, what we have done in our life, I think, what we have done in our inside our profession is try to balance these two spheres, and that's exactly what we do. And honestly, I'm now 65, and really have still not understood how to balance well these two spheres. What I know that they are different. What I know is that sometimes it's much better to accept that they cohabit inside us, inside each one of us, without, let's say, a linear sequence. So what I've understood, what I've learned in my life, in my profession, in my career, is that it's not so interesting, it's not so useful, it's not so productive to put research before design. So, like, say, we have to develop a very strong analysis if we want to act in a very, let's say, efficient way. But at the same time, I'm also not convinced by the other sequence. So that in order to let's say, to have a clear knowledge about the context, you have to test, to make this content to react to a proposal, to make the content to react to a design, to a let's say, a kind of a proposition. So my simply, let's say, awareness is that probably the best way to balance these two spheres, design and research, the one, it's about selection. The second, research, is about inclusion, is to let them cohabit in a kind of schizophrenic way. So I believe that we are basically, we should accept this schizophreny, and in a way it can produce sudden and sometimes amazing synapses, exactly because we don't want to put them in a linear sequence. So what I'm going to do now is simply to talk about these two spheres and how we have tried to let's say to define a tension between these two. And what we have done with our firm in Milano and in Shanghai, what in our work with university and research, it's a more or less to trying to, let's say, make these two spheres converging on one strong obsession, which is about green. And you see here the title of the book that we have. It's not still on. We're going to publish in a few weeks with Actar, with our friends Barcelona Actar, and the title is Green Obsession, but probably it's more important the subtitle, which is Trees Toward Cities and Human Toward Forest. And do you see the slides? You see the slides going up? Okay.
The new one.
The new one, you see the text now?
Mineral City, living nature, yes.
No, oh, no.
Don't know.
It doesn't go. Mamma mia, che palle. Sorry, but we are so bored of this. Sorry. Just wait if I can try to find.
If not, you share the presentation.
Yeah, I can share the presentation. And it's okay. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay, let's do it that way.
Okay.
You see now?
Now, yes.
Oh, great. Fantastico. Okay, go ahead. So just to start, this is something that probably you all know. It's a series of documentary by David Attenborough about, let's say, living nature and how the life of animals could cohabit with the life of humans in this huge mineral configuration that basically we have choose like the first habitat for more than 60% of the planet. And this issue is very important. So how we can combine, how we can be aware of, let's say, the multitude of living creatures that are cohabiting with us. And Attenborough was extremely, let's say, anticipating this issue, I think, in a very interesting way. But if we go back to this notion of, let's say, urban Pangea, if we go back to this awareness that we have created a specific habitat for our species, and this habitat, it's something that is us to try to expel out all what was connected with living nature. If we could, as we know, concentrate all what is urban, all what is, we could call it urban condition, in one part of the planet, probably will not cover more than the 3/4% of the surface of the emergent lands. And that's something that we have always to consider with strong attention, because at the same time, we know that this, let's say, sphere, this Pangea is growing, is growing, and it's consuming 70% of the energy resources, and is producing the 75% of the CO2 emission. But at the same time, this, let's say, continuous extension of the urban condition in the world is not linear, is not, let's say, following the same trends. But we know well that in the last years, the geography of this extension, of this urban explosion has drastically changed. And this is connected also with other very important issues, like the one connected with poverty and with the process of migration. But I don't want to stress this issue that I know you know so well. What I love to do now is to try to ask you to follow me in another serial consideration, because if it is true that we have this, let's say, awareness about the explosion of the urban condition of the world, and with different geography and with some disequilibria also in a term of geographical area, it is also true at the same time that we have another side, that if you want, the other part of the planet, it's and we are simply talking about the emergent land, not about the ocean. It's basically what we could still consider as area where the presence of woodland and forest is still important. Let's just stop and andiamo avanti. And this part is covering not the 3, but the 30% of the surface of the emergent land. And we know well that this 30% it's crucial for the life of our species, and is crucial for the future of life in the planet for many reasons that you can see here. Just to underline one of that it's absorbing the 30% of the CO2 emission produced by cities. It's also a cradle of biodiversity. It's also important also in production of noble energies. So I think that all this helps us to understand how our relation with plants, our relation with trees becomes so important, and so, they say, at the center of attention of public strategy in different parts of the world. The challenge is very clear, how we can make cities not simply the first cause of climate change and global warming, not simply the first victims, because coastal metropolitan environments are year by year by flooding and so on, but how we can make city protagonists of a very, let's say, strong pain to reverse, if it's possible, global warming, to change life in the planet. More or less 15 years ago at the Venice Biennale, I was working at the time with Jeremy Rifkin, and I was proposing an installation called Sustainable Dystopias, where I was trying to show how this approach was related with sustainability. Sustainability became, at the beginning of the millennium, a very important issue, if you remember well, but also in the 90s. And sustainability was a concept, was related with the idea of an impact. So a human impact on the life of the planet. What we were trying to let's say, to figure out, to underline with this installation was that the impact, it's a concept that has a very strong influence, and it's conditioning more or less of our profession. And following this idea of sustainability in terms of capacity to reduce the impact of human life on the planet, we could arrive to define some total dystopias scenarios. For instance, one where all what's happening in terms of horizontal surface in our city will be inhabited by other living species, or totally covered by agricultural cultivation, or simply abandoned to the efficiency of mechanical and technological devices. That was a way to, let's say, to introduce a series of thoughts about the relation with the other living species inside the northern environment. And I cannot forget that some years before, in the 80s, Michael Crichton was publishing this amazing book. It was a novel about the life of this family of gorillas in Africa. And probably some years after that, David Kiman, who was a journalist, because, you know, in science and fiction, was using more or less the same cover, the same image, when he started to talk about the process of spillover or zoonosis. So how a virus can jump from an animal who is cohabiting with us in an urban condition, or cohabiting with us after a process of deforestation, after a process of reduction of biodiversity, could become a very strong, let's say, risk for biodiversity connected with the process of spillover. So this kind of consideration were always in a way under the umbrella of the concept of sustainability, where always the point was, how can we reduce, how we control, how can we repair, how can we, let's say, reconstitute a good balance with nature. And also, if you remember, some years ago with Paolo Antonelli and MoMA, we have developed this exhibition called Broken Nature, where more or less the concept was the same. So well, there are two clear spheres. One is the spheres of human behaviors, and the other is a sphere of living nature. And the point is how we can make these two spheres working together. But the point is how we can reduce the impact of our life on the sphere of living nature. But in a certain way, I think that what happened with pandemia, what's happening with COVID-19 was let's say, really drastically and suddenly changing our perspective. So, you know, these images, because during the lockdown, we have seen animals coming back. Animals were already there. Already there, but the fact that we are abandoning the present, we are allowing them to be more and more protagonists of our life. And that's a research that we developed in 2014, 15 and 16 at Milano Politecnico. And what we have done there was try to study how the life of animal species that are cohabiting with us inside an urban environment could be described and reinterpreted. And was really, let's say, extremely interesting for all of us to ask any students to accept, to, let's say, to accept the perspective of one of these animals, to try to design the daily cycle of spatial and time cycle of life, and also what was connected with serious feeding, and how to imagining different kind of cohabitation. That's work, but it's still alive, and something that we do was extremely fertile, and helped us to try to accept the fact that we have to change the perspective. We have to abandon this idea of sustainability in terms of, let's say, separation of two spheres, and enter in a totally different concept, which is more the concept of biodiversity in terms of accepting the point of view of the other living species on our same environment. And so in a certain way, not talking about broken nature, but talking about us as a part of the same natural condition. That was also influencing many of our works. And I'm just showing a large scale work that we have just proposed for Geneva and Switzerland, where we have been asked to imagine the tension of Geneva in the next 20 years. And what we have done, instead of imagining a simply extension of the peripheral settlement of Geneva, we have completely changed our let's say, perspective. And what we have said is to propose the idea of a kind of urban ring, a kind of urban archipelago, who has at the center not a square, not a monument, not a church, not a mosque, but a mountain. The Salève mountain, which is more or less in between Geneva and Annecy, so in between Switzerland and French, it's in a main cradle of biodiversity. And so you see here this concept of a metropolis who grows with a system of forest and a sequence of small urban villages all around a mountain. There is also another consideration in this case, which is connected with CERN. So this system with ring is also the reproduction as on the surface ground of what's happening, 80, 100 meter low, what will happen in terms of the duplication of the collider, particle collider that CERN is developing in Geneva. But I think this is idea of archipelago metropolis, where the concept of biodiversity became stronger and stronger, and but you have really at the center of the life of the other living species together, and that's a view that we have developed with Baucu, with Pierpaolo Tamborelli and team in order to show our concept of a different metropolis of biodiversity that has a mountain at its center, a mountain at its core. This is simply one of the possible directions of our work. Another is more related with the concept of urban forestry. And also in this case, I start with David Attenborough, because David came in Milano in 2012, and he was interested to show the construction of the vertical forest in Milano. At the beginning, we were extremely, let's say, surprised by his attention. And then we understood that he was extremely interested to follow the construction and to see what is going to happen on the different levels of the different balconies of this, let's say, probably quite bizarre building. And what David was saying is that this building was let's say, an experiment to check how it's possible to imagine a different cohabitation of different living species in a very, let's say, traditional urban settlement. That's the end of his documentary, was talking about the architect and urban world and the connection with habitat and other living species. The vertical forest, you know, it's there since now 8 years. But the first plants, the first trees started to be moved from the botanic nursery, it was at the periphery of Milano, to the site in Porta Nuova more than 8 years ago, was basically 11 years ago. So it's a period of time that can allow us to have a quite important series of consideration, you know, because in this year, and you see here, this is atom view, it's how it's changed the colors, how this building is really mirroring the change of time. And that probably is the most surprising also for us result of this building. But anyway, now after 12 years, we are in condition to, let's say, to see this prototype as a case study, as a way that we can, let's say, check what was working and what was not working in that experiment. And this is helping us also to go ahead, trying to, let's say, to improve what we've done, which is also something else very, very important. So we are now working in many different parts of the world, trying to make this idea of vertical forest more efficient, and also trying to develop different approach to this typology of high-rise green buildings with biodiversity. Well, many years ago, we have also been protagonists of the first worldwide forum on urban forest, and that was a manifesto that which you introduced this forum, was let's say saying with very clear that vertical forest is only one of the ways we have, only one of the tools we have to make our city greener, to implement biodiversity. There are many other many other tools that are, let's say, so crucial and important for our life. But the concept of vertical forest is something that we are trying to develop in different parts of the world. And what makes every example, like say, every exercise, every, like say, experiment for us a challenge is that every time we start with a different approach, because we start considering the climate condition, then we consider the selection of species of plants that can be more adaptable to that specific climate condition. Only at that point we start to work with let's say morphology of the facade, because we do house for plants and trees, and so that means that we treat plants as tenants, users, and every plants at its evolutionary trajectory, as it is needs, its desires, its expectation. So that's explain why we define the space in the building in relation with the selection of species that we have done. But as we were saying, we have tried also to go ahead, and since the first prototype in Milano was extremely expensive, also in terms of research, because we have for the first time done to, let's say, solve some technical problems, like to see how it's possible to make a tree stable at 120 meters with extreme windy conditions. We have tried immediately to imagine how to make this kind of buildings affordable to everybody. And this is what we have done. We have opened some months ago in Eindhoven, and it's the first social housing, vertical forest. Honestly, we are very proud of that because it's a space which is a building which was required many studies. We have tried to use prefabrication in order to reduce the cost of construction. We have, I think, also worked a lot in order to, let's say, make the irrigation system less expensive. We have also drastically introduced new way, imagine the maintenance of all what is green in these buildings. And finally, the result is, for me, extremely interesting. We have here more 180 50 square meter, 50 meter square apartments, and now they are basically all inhabited by young couples, researchers, students. You probably know this district in Eindhoven, which is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting example of urban regeneration. So this is for us a very important result of our research/design work. And it's a pillar for us. It's something that will help us to go ahead exploring other possible direction. One of the direction here you see still what we have done in Eindhoven, also how, in a way, these are the facade of our buildings before the construction, because the definition of the living species means to work with botanics, to work with ethologists, to have a place where we can go and control how trees are growing one by one. So it's a very important and very, let's say, exciting work that we have done. And to combine, you see on the facade of the building, the different space that the building, that every tree needs, is in the case of Eindhoven. But as you were saying, this is another very important point. This is the first vertical forest built in China, in Hangguang, and is also social housing building with all the imagined the condition, but this is just picture taken a few weeks ago. So street trees are growing in the winter time, but we are also very proud of that. At the same time, we are in construction in many different parts of the world. This is, for instance, Utrecht, which is a very complex green building with a basement which is commercial, then system of office, and then top there are 2 or 3 different residential conditions. And this is another direction. Here we are in Antwerp, and in this case we have worked on the idea of green roofs that are commonplace for all the tenants, all the owners of the building. This is the construction site a few weeks before the opening of the building. And the same issue we are now introducing in a project we are developing in Milano, where the idea of the vertical forest is translated in a different typology. This is a courtyard. It's not a high rise, it's not a tower, but you see here is a courtyard, which is more or less reflecting also a tradition and the history of urban settlement in Milano, but totally in a different way. So we are trying to use the same solutions that we have followed in the vertical forest, Milan and Eindhoven and other parts of the world, but with a completely different typological context and also approach. But we are working also in a different, let's say, climate condition, like this is the tower building in Cairo, in Egypt, in the desert. And we are also trying to introduce different projects. This is a project that we're going to develop in Milano, nearby the vertical forest, is a result of a competition we have won together with Diller and Scofidio and Renfro. We've done many different with Liz and this with Diller and Scofidio. We share some common, let's say, values, and this is a result of the competition. And we have in this competition developed the idea of this Botanica Tower, which you see on the left. And what makes this building for me interesting is that it's completed in wooden structure. So you know how much wood is able to let's say conserve CO2 inside it, and also reduce the production of CO2 in the process of construction. So that's another very important, crucial step we have all to do if we want to make this, let's say, green building really efficient, really capable to cut the construction. This building also, it reached the 70% of renewable energy in terms of energy sufficiency. So it's very important. Another direction of work is when we have to deal with existing buildings, because, and this is very important. This is Brussels. We have been asked to redesign a huge office complex organizable buildings. And what we have done is to add a new autonomous structure facade with plants and trees. And this is something that's going to be constructed in the next weeks. And this is another exercise we're doing in Tuscany, in Prato, where we are dealing with very, let's say, if you want, mediocre office building and social housing construction. And we try to change their presence, adding new facade that are eating green inside it, also not simply on that construction. Just to do another, to open another window, to open another perspective, if it's true that we have to do our best to make our city more sustainable, to introduce biodiversity through the introduction of a green environment, it's also true that in some parts of the world we still need to build new cities. And this is something that we cannot forget. For instance, China, that's an image of an exhibition that we have done some weeks ago in Shanghai about forest city, the idea of forest city. In China, we know every year we have something like 15 millions of people that are abandoning the countryside, abandoning the field, and then let's say increasing of the city. And it's so important to try to show that it's possible to develop an idea of let's say, extension of urban condition, which is not a simply extension of what already exists, and the creation of this horrible and complicated megalopolis, where you have, like, you simply multiplicate the condition of poverty, the condition of disease, the condition of, and what we are trying to do in China is to try to propose a different model of a system of middle-sized cities surrounded by agricultural field that they have let's say, a very strong core, which is normally a park and the garden, and also a city where buildings of different size, of different function, are covered by plants and green everywhere. So this concept is something that we have developed also in other parts of the world, and this is, for instance, what we had done some years ago in Tirana, where we have been asked to develop a concept for the Alpine in Tirana. And also in this case, the idea was to imagine a vertical, orbital forest all around the city. And in this case, the combination of this orbital forest and the creation of new community hubs through the construction of new schools, of new public schools, was very important. And that's another theme which is apparently far or distant from what we are discussing, but it's not true, because the notion of biodiversity has also to deal with the culture and the social condition of people. And in this case, this is an image of a series of schools that we are now opening that has this idea to be opened. So open school, open every hour of the day, every day of the year, for all the ages. So they become really hubs for communities. They are extremely construction with very, very, let's say, cheap sources, but limited resource, but the result, terminal life is very important. And that's another project that we are following in Southeast Mexico, where in this case it's not a school, it's more a system of research center and university nearby Cancun. What was a place where there was the idea to develop probably one of the biggest mall with China owners in Central America, sorry. And at a certain moment, the municipality decided to stop this project and asked the new property to imagine a completely different scenario. So we came there, we have seen this, let's say, huge concrete platform who was already destroyed this mangrove forest, and we have proposed to do something completely different, like a vertical forest city for 120,000 people, with this system of university research center with more than 7 million of plants, and also with a system of renewable energies. But just to go back to China, I think that another very important question, it's what we could do in order to try to reverse this trend in of the countryside and agricultural villages by farmers that become citizens they start to be a poor farmer and they right to be poor citizens. And so together with Slow Food, which is an Italian/international company who deal with cooperation of farmer community, we have started to propose in 10 different villages, agricultural villages in China, a different model of evolution, where this is not simply about the creation of a new economy, a new circular economy in the relation between agriculture and transformation of the agricultural product into food, but it's also related with the production of, let's say, a new social habitat. And for what we have done is to propose for every how we say group of villages to have always a small museum, a small school, and a small library. And for us, it's a kind of precondition, if you want, really to guarantee the idea that we can invest the future of the life of the son there and the nephew that are there in that side. I want to, let's say, back to the conclusion, introducing the idea of bioconnection. And I do this starting with the amazing work done by Richard Weller. Richard Weller is an American researcher and teacher that has developed this idea of the war park. And basically the idea is very simple, starts from the geography of biodiversity. What you see here are the most relevant in terms of biodiversity part of the emerging land of the planet. And Richard's idea is that if we be able to connect this crowd of biodiversity, the territory that are so densely impacted by biodiversity, we will multiplicate the advantages and the positive effects of biodiversity itself. And in September 2019, just some months before the explosion of COVID, we were in New York at this climate change forum with United Nations, and we proposed this idea of bioconnection, of corridor for biodiversity, but put together different parts. And what we have done basically is to show something that is not so known, still not so known, that was happening in Central Africa since 2007, thanks to the country of Union Africa that tried to create this green wall in order to stop the extension of the Sahara Desert. And probably it's not so, although this bioconnection, this corridor biodiversity is still there, it's working, it's growing, and it's let's say an amazing example of what is possible to do. And in New York, we started also to work with different subjects like FAO, like United Habitat, C40, to see how it was possible to imagine to develop and extend this corridor of biodiversity, also touching other parts of the planet, like the Gobi Desert in China, or in the case of Southern Europe, Italy and Spain have some part of the land which are coastal land which are so important in terms of biodiversity. And now we are working in order to make all this more easier and possible. And the real challenge is, in this case, how we can make cities not simply obstacles to the extension of the corridor biodiversity, but if it's possible, hubs where this biodiversity is developed, is let's say really straightened. And in order to do that, we need a forest. We need to make our cities greener for sure, but also we need to make a green forest and plants to surrounding our city. And that's exactly the result of the Forestry project that we launched in Milano, who was at the beginning the idea of a system of green surfaces that are also covering the center of the city, and it's a project that is so important for all of us. Well, just to conclude, just to conclude, I think that this step from the concept of sustainability to the concept of biodiversity, it's absolutely important for all of us. This is not simply about, let's say, the fact that we will be aware of the needs of multiplicating let's say, biological surfaces all over the world. And this is not simply about the fact that we have understood that deforestation, for instance, it's a precondition for the disease and the spillover of virus that have really transfigured the life of millions and millions of people around the planet. The step you have to do is much more complicated, if you want, and strong. It's about the change of perspective of our relation with nature. We have understood that thanks to the life of a microorganism that suddenly appeared inside us, all what we had done in the past in order to rebalance our relation with nature, try to repair the mistake we have done was completely probably incorrect. Since nature is not something which is outside us. We have done our best to put living nature outside our body, outside our houses, outside our city, and finally we had to deal with the fact that nature was already inside us. And so I want to conclude with this, let's say, an exhibition, a research that we are doing now in Milano with Triennale of Milano, that will open in May, and this has this very particular title, Unknown Unknowns. Unknown Unknowns is centered by, I probably remember the Secretary of State Rumsfeld, United States, that in 2001, in order to convince the senators that was necessary to launch Botanica in Iraq, was talking about the fact that United States were controlling the planet, the political of the planet. They were aware there were parts of the planet that were not enough studied, not known, but what was more, let's say, important, that they had to be aware there were parts of the world that they still don't know. That concept of unknown unknowns, it's something that I think we have to, let's say, to feel close also when we talk about what happened in the last month. So in a certain way, the dimension of unknown has increased in a proportion that we were not able to consider before the pandemics. So what we don't know, it's something which will become more and more important. And also this necessary step from the concept of sustainability to the concept of biodiversity is part of that. So what we're going to do now in Triennale is like to try to explore this territory of mysteries that are surrounding us in different fields, in different parts of our knowledge. Basically, we know the 5% of the universe, we know the 5% of the oceans, we know the 5% of the synapses that are working in our brain. The real point is that we don't know what is a 100%. So also this proportion has totally changed, because the dimension of what we have to understand in the future has totally changed. So I think we have to learn to cohabit with the dimension of mystery, but at the same time to not abandon the challenge or try to explore what we don't know. So thank you so much, and it was great to be with you, sorry, and I'm here for some questions.
Okay, I don't know how we do applause in a digital format, but I would like to make an applause for Stefano's lecture, and I have 3 or 4 questions. One of the first questions that was written by one IAAC student, former IAAC student, is about you have shown the buildings and the project with some trees in the buildings and much more, but specifically about this topic with the trees, she's referring about the fungi, no? The fact that the trees in the forest, they are talking between each other through the roots. And then that there is this kind of hidden language. And there are many theories also by Italian biologists talking, saying something about trees talking between each other and communicating. So what is your approach about this situation while in fact in a building, they're a bit more constrained because they are inside a container?
What we know about the intelligence of trees, and Stefano Mancuso, for instance, is someone that it's so close to me and to us. We are now working together in many different parts of the world. And Stefano asked me how roots are sometimes in condition to transmit some information and data, but also branches are doing the same, no? And what we have done in our vertical forest is not so different to what happens normally in a mountain, where you have rock slopes and the roots are, let's say, separated by rocks, because rocks and minerals are part of the ground of many let's say until environment. So we do both. In sometimes when we are in condition to work with an horizontal surface, it's easier to make the roots collaborating and working together. When you work in a vertical condition, it's more complicated, although we do pots that have an amazing extension. So what happens in our pots is sometimes is a reality, the fact that the roots are working together.
Thank you. This was a question from Marilia Fernandez. And now we have two similar questions, one from Angel and Kamal Lamdrewis, because they are asking about a bit more information about the experience after 8 years or 10 years, as you say, in the trees. If your practice has conducted any post-occupation studies to closely evaluate the impact of the vertical forest, for example, about the ventilation, about the lighting, the water consumption, all of these, no?
Yeah. We have a lot of data now. In terms of production of oxygen, capacity to absorb also the dust, the micro pollution, that is one of the poison of the air in our cities. And you know so well how this is also one of the cause of major diffusion of COVID-19, because it makes it's more, let's say, weak and less capable to react to the pandemic. But we have data also on another amazing result of what we vertical forest in terms of reduction of the heat. So it's about 30 degrees what's happening in the summertime in Milano or in Eindhoven or in Shanghai. So really on the surface of the building, the fact that you have this kind of double facade, which is a biological facade, it's really reducing drastically. And this is also, let's say, a process that can reduce also the consumption of energy, because, for instance, in August, in the vertical forest, the tenants are not used to the condition of the air, because the trees, the branch and the leaves are working that way. So then we have worked a lot in terms of making this building, reducing at maximum the use of water. So the cycle of water, the normal is by the underground and pumped on the top, thanks to the renewable energy, the solar panel on the roof. Then the water is coming down and going back on the ground. And also from that point of view, we have now some very interesting results. And so it's such a complicated, difficult, but intriguing, ongoing work that we are doing. So we are lucky on that, because honestly, we are really working at the same time, exploring new fields, but in the same direction. And this is something that I think I am aware that is quite rare when it happens, but this makes our work so, let's say, amazing.
Good. So there is one question from Samuel Rabé. Sorry for the pronunciation in case. Well, he's interested about your projects more in the green spaces and about how successful has the creation of habitat within these green spaces based on endemic regions and other projects in plantations. So I suppose that the topic is related about how the transformation of the public spaces. For example, you have shown the idea of extending the greener to create the barrier in Africa. I think it's clear to expand this to Arabia. Well, maybe it's a bit more challenging, although Ethiopia, that now is almost desert, used to be 90% of covered by trees. And by the way, the Italians, it seems that they did a lot of deforestation in the 20th century. So the question is how this reimplantation of the nature and how working in these difficult climates can be possible within the nature, no?
This is such a good question. So I'm not a botanic, so honestly, when we have been asked to work in cities like Cairo, for instance, or in Riyadh, what we do always is to try to really study first the species that are more in condition to let's say to cohabit with this extreme condition, and then the point is basically about water. So how we can gather water, trying to avoid any of water condition, and this is something that we are now quite, let's say, do and to propose for different part of the world, but it's always a very delicate issue, a delicate point. Yeah, absolutely, but it's possible to do it. It's possible, absolutely, and the point is always the balance between renewable energies, presence of water resources, and let's say urban settlement. So the balance between the three is the most important issue.
Good. Well, there are some questions talk about the maintenance. The cost of maintenance of these buildings are very high. I suppose that this is a very typical question.
Yeah, no, this is a question that
everyone is
every
saying.
time I have the question. It's not so high.
Don't answer. Okay.
No, I answer because I think it's very important, and I think that the answer. So it's not by me, but it's by for instance, what we have done in Eindhoven. You can visit it when I really suggest, and we'd love to organize when this pandemic will be over, some collective visit to that building, because that building is it's simply the confirm that it's possible to do something which is not at all expensive, also in terms of maintenance. But is always let's say an ongoing research, and also done by sometimes we do mistakes, sometimes we have some good solution. It's a test improve sequence, and basically what we have learned from the Milano experience is that it's possible to not have a very complicated system of maintenance, substituting it with the presence of what we have called flying gardeners, which is a bunch of gardeners that are also our climbers, and they come twice per time a year, and they come from the different facade of the tower, and they take care of the plants, of the trees, in a quite sophisticated, precise, and cheap way. So that's not an answer, but is one of the possible answers that has helped us to drastically cut the cost of maintenances. So now the cost of maintenance are absolutely, you could say, irrelevant.
Yeah.
If we talk about green.
Good. So two last.
Maybe I should add something.
Yeah.
It's very important, and that's something that I have learned doing this work, that normally we are used to consider all what is green in our buildings as a kind of common good. So we don't allow the tenants to take care of the plants. Plants are part of a kind of common resource. And from a psychological and from an economical point of view, this has become an amazing decision. So it was extremely successful.
And you have centralized irrigation system, I suppose.
Everything, yes.
Yeah, fantastic. This was one of my dreams always, to grow food with centralized irrigation system.
Me too.
Yeah, so two last questions. One is coming from Baidaura, this is our laboratory, and somehow it's connected with one of our thoughts, because our students are living now in a forest. And every time someone comes there to the Parc de Collserola, I say,
I know, it's amazing. I went there with you.
So
and
yeah, you are always welcome, Stefano. But I say, look at the forest, and this is the future, because in fact, there are only two possible futures. One is that the civilization collapse, and then in the future, the cities will become forests, like in Mexico and in other places in Birmania, where the nature took over the forest. So this is one possible future is civilization collapse. The other is to build ourselves the city as a forest. No, we are working together in this Green Book of Biocities and many another ideas. So the question is how we transform our cities in a radical way, not only building by building, but in a more integrated way. No, so the question is here: where is the limit? No. For example, in Collserola, in Barcelona, the wild boar are going to the city because they don't have food anymore, because agriculture disappeared and so on. No, so at which point you show very well that during the crisis, the monkeys were in the middle of the city. So if you stop human life, then the nature come back. So the question is, what is the point where our new vision for cities should be? No?
No. You're touching a very delicate point, because I think we have to consider the condition of proximity that different living species could have in our urban context. At the same time, we know well that there are some risk in accepting this proximity. So this is a very delicate issue. So I believe there is not one answer, but it's something that we have to study, considering the specific living species that are cohabiting or could cohabit. Just to give you an example, I'm now working in Roma. So we have been asked to imagine the future of Rome. Rome, it's not simply a city, Rome. It's not simply a metropolis. Rome is a world. You have everything. You have the past, you have the different cross-section of the past. At the same time, you have an amazing seagulls, complexity of our living creature cohabiting together. Where you have this niche of biodiversity that sometimes are really growing in this part of city where ancient settlements are superimposed to new things. It's a complexity in itself, translated in an urban environment. And in Roma, for instance, the relation with the fact that just considering the life of birds, no, seagulls are now the predominant species, and this has drastically changed everything. And this is in reason of the fact that the distribution of food and also all the system of waste was uncontrolled. And this has attracted from the coast thousands of new population of seagulls and birds that has completely transfigured the balance between the different species. So what I want to say is that we have to do this step, but at the same time, I think that we cannot be deresponsabilized. So when we talk about a kind of non-anthropocentric point of view on cities, I totally agree on that. I've written a lot on that. But I know very well that there is a basic paradox, that the more we want to cohabit with different species and we want to decentralize, if you want to move our species from the pedestal of life and to make ourselves part of a larger combination of living species, the more we have to be aware that we have a very, very, very strong responsibility. That means that we have to govern. That means that we have to have a vision. We have to, in a way, to run on that. So it's not simply to say, well, okay, let's accept any kind of cohabitation, any kind of proximity. Not at all. We have to have a vision, and that's probably is one of the reasons that makes the role of architects and urban planners so important today. Okay.
The last question and the last comment is like, well, if we see the history, every 50 years, there is a big new urban model for cities. In fact, the Bauhaus and the modern movement was somehow defined 100 years ago after the First World War and the Spanish flu. 50 years ago, after the crisis of the petrol and also the social crisis, the Mayor of Paris and everything, was the moment of coming back to the city center and to start to discuss and to stop the modernity. But it seemed that it was really a clear intention from.
Vincent, we have lost you. Vincent. Vediamo gli altri. Vincent.
Light
Vincent, sorry, Vincent, we have lost you for
yeah, because the light went out. I don't know why, but so sorry, Stefano. My question was, are we expecting, because you are talking now about this transformation, that the architects I mean, you are always also working with international organizations, but this idea become more a structural approach about the future of urbanity? Because it seems that still there are many, I mean, the international standard is a bit far away and is still dealing with the commercial structures and many other things, but this kind of deep change is still to be happen, no? So my question is how this transformation can be organized in a way similar to what people were doing in the letter of Athens.
Well,
in the 70s, in the Biennale,
I think it's, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's a possibility. And as you were saying, when we had this kind of success, which means also a kind of vulgarization, if you want, democratization of some concept, there is always the risk of the reduction and banalization of the principles that were at the beginning promoting a new scenario, a new vision on the future of cities. And that's happening also with the idea of sustainability, of the ecological transition. We know well that all this, let's say, accused of greenwashing, they are sometimes extremely superficial, but sometimes they are absolutely founded. So that's a point that we have every time to consider with attention. But I believe that from that point of view, what we have experienced in the last month with the pandemic, it's very important. So if we don't want to simply imagine that the solution for the future of city is to add green surfaces, but we have understood that the point is really to change the perspective between human sphere and living nature sphere. So if we accept to change this perspective, the risk of banalization is reduced at minimum. And we could really imagine to change the perspective, to change also future of our profession in a way. And that's an amazing challenge. So I'd love to imagine that the future will be that. So I agree with you, but I think what we have nowadays the resources and the tools to avoid that reduction.
So, Stefano, thank you very much for your incredible and inspirational speech. I would like also to remember to our audience that next Friday we'll have also another incredible lecture by Meg Lohman. She is the inventor of the canopy biology. So she decided to climb to the trees and start to study all the insects and all the life that is happening in the upper part of the forest. And then she started to build these canopies and bridges and everything. And we are talking about several different projects with her. She's a good friend of IAAC. She was also here some time ago. So that means that this fusion between design and science, between architects and biologists, and so on, is something that we need in this new generation of cities. Stefano, you are a green master. Congratulations for all your projects. We are waiting for your book from Actar. Books of Actar are always late, but we hope that will be soon in the market. Yeah.
No, the book is coming. The book is coming. We can pre-order that. So we'll
okay. On guys, you can pre-order the book in Amazon. It's called Green Obsession by Actar, and well, and order in your bookshop in the corner. Not everything is Amazon in the world. You can order in your bookshop in the corner. And I thank you, all of you, for all your questions, comments. I thank also Areti Markopoulou, that is the academic director of IAAC, that is here, and all our IAAC students that are here around. And we hope to see you soon here in Barcelona, Stefano.
With pleasure. With pleasure. We don't wait to come. Thank you so much.
Can you, everyone, switch on the cameras, please? We love to see the faces of the people that you are all hidden. It will be great to take, to see all of you here and to say hello with your hand. I see Guto, I see Leif, I see Carolina, Anton, Jordi, Veronica, I see Charles, Aaron, Maria, so some students from IAAC. I see kids. One moment, Miranda is with one kid. That's super important that we have kids also with us. I see Fabio, Rohit, Ariana, Jose Miguel, Juan, Shu. We see Shu. We don't know if he seems to be Chinese, but we don't know where is him right now. And we see the people from Baidaura that they are there in a lockdown, everyone wearing a mask. That's good. We see Aida, Martin, Richard, Susha, Rafael, Erini, also a student from IAAC, and Mish. So guys, thank you for being here, and we are waiting for you. If you can join us next Friday and in the following lectures. Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, everyone.
Ciao, grazie mille. See you very soon. Ciao, ciao. Bye, bye.